Brian again. I just want to talk a little bit about the idea of support, especially evidence and later on values. When we talk about evidence and support, we're talking about the building blocks of argument. Last time we talked about claims, those are the conclusions, but also argument has data. It's an important point for them to include. So when we talk about evidence, there are lots of different schemes. We're going to talk about three main types of evidence in this class. The first of these are examples. Examples are individual cases in which something is used to prove the claim. You'll encounter this a lot in argument when someone says, this is a great example of this thing being true. A lot of these are in your examples of editorials. They're going to use specific cases in order to try and prove their point. When an author uses one case to say this is actually indeed the case, whether it's observable or whether they're expressing opinion, they're using examples. They could use one example, they could use two examples, they could use 3 or 4 or 5 examples. When they have a collection of examples, a number put together, that's what we call a statistic. That's our second type of evidence. A statistic is a collection of many examples. Could be thousands, could be millions of examples, all put together. And there are many types of statistics, and this is not a course in examining statistics, but I would like for you to know the difference between magnitude, segment, and trend. A magnitude is a type of statistic that tells how large a thing is. Think about the term magnitude. We use it for earthquakes to talk about the severity of earthquakes that are going on. Second type of statistic is that of a segment. A segment, just like it sounds, tells how big a certain population is in relationship to a larger group. If you're familiar with pie charts, you're talking about how big a certain thing is. Think about a pizza. If you cut a pizza into 4 pieces, each one is a segment of the overall pizza. If you cut it again, you've got a smaller segment. Segments measure how large something is in relation to the current overall population. Finally, the third type of statistic I want you to know about is a trend. A trend measures change in examples over time. So as we are going through processes and things vary up or down, that's what we've got as a trend. Third type of evidence or support that we talk about is opinion or expert testimony. That is, it's not all the use of observable conditions. Sometimes people are using expert testimony in there. Now, one thing that you've got to question in argument is what makes a source expert. That's an important factor for us as we're going forward on items, is to try and figure out what makes somebody a good source or a bad source. That's part of the idea of testing argument, and testing argument's really, really important for us. It's something that we look for in this particular class. So our textbook identifies different tests that we can use to try and figure out what's good argument and what's bad argument. Internal consistency is one. Is the data consistent with other data from the same source? External consistency is another. Is the data consistent with data from unrelated sources? And then there's a test of relevancy. Is the evidence that's offered actually relevant to the conclusion that is being made? These general tests can be applied to any type of argument that is used. Now, evidence is not the only form of support in an argument. You can also use values and needs. That is, not every argument that's going on is something that can be concretized through the use of evidence. A lot of times it's values that are used in things. And we've got to understand some differences in values. And there's unlike evidence categories, these terms of value, they're not exclusive for one another. But I'm going to talk about a different set of ways you can understand values. You can understand values as they are stated or implied. So sometimes you have arguments like equal pay for equal work, that the value is actually there, it's said right in the thing. Or sometimes you've got values that are implied. You should work hard for school. Well, there's a value of education there, but it's not explicitly stated, it's only implied. Values can be positive or they can be negative. Positive values are things that are desirable: freedom, liberty, self-respect. Negative values are things that arguers use to try and get us away from: distrust, falsity, fear, indecision. These can be used as resources for argument as well. There are values that are terminal or instrumental. I'm talking about the ends versus the means. Terminal values are things that you want to go for, like security, equality, happiness, harmony. These are all things we'd like to achieve in life. But the ways that we get there, well, those are instrumental values. Like, it's important to have ambition. It's important to be hardworking. It's important to be polite. That's a different set of values altogether. Finally, we might categorize values as abstract or concrete. Abstract values are very, very common. We have ideas that just float around, like justice, and it gets used in argument and attached to certain things. But also objects can serve as concrete values as well. concrete values, for example, the flag. We've got a number of controversies in this country surrounding the flag. Flag burning, flag respect. That's because the flag itself is a kind of concrete value. It stands to represent the things that we value as a country. It stands in for patriotism and all of other things. Now, the important thing about support is that it varies from argument sphere to argument sphere. Spheres are groups of decision makers charged with evaluating argument. They're not locations. There can be different levels of spheres, but the importance of support depends on the sphere that it is in. Think about the legal sphere. In the legal sphere, hearsay is discounted as evidence. It's not useful at all. However, in the political sphere, hearsay, it's kind of reigning king. If you have hearsay, you have some of the best evidence against your opponent. In the scientific sphere, we test the absence of evidence. That's called the null hypothesis. It's the main thing that is used there. So the sphere that the argument takes place in, it really does have a lot to do with how support and evidence is valued and how it can weigh in for different things. So consider that, the importance of spheres, as you are thinking through your own editorial and working through argument as we try and examine the process of advocacy.